cooperation between Iran and North Korea in the Middle East world?
Between Iran and North Korea?
Yes.
I don't have anything to provide on that. Janie, I have not seen anything to indicate that that's the case, but obviously, something we'll continue to keep a close eye on. Thank you. Let me go to the phone here. Constantine from military.com.
Thanks, Pat. Just following up on Oren's question and broadening it out slightly, can you speak to whether any military facilities or bases sustained any damage as a result of the hurricane in Florida? And second question is, the Navy specifically sortied a few ships, and are you able to offer any
the services to talk about their capabilities? And I'm hesitant to speculate and provide something off the cuff in terms of the status of DoD facilities in Florida. I would say anecdotally, initial indications are, as I highlighted in the topper, that it wasn't the worst case scenario. In other words, there's some damage, but not extensive damage. But again, we need the time to be able to go in, have the teams make those assessments and come back with more detailed information. So I appreciate your patience on that, but I'm confident we'll have more up-to-date information in the very near future. All right, let's go to Chris Gordon, Air and Space Forces Magazine.
Thanks, Pat, and I appreciate the full name. Can you confirm whether the Ukraine Defense Contact Group Summit is indeed going to be postponed at the Secretary of Defense and the Minister of Defense level? And I understand these summits are useful, but can you give us a sense of how much work is actually done by the UDCG in between these formal meetings?
Yeah, thanks for the question. So, yes, the Ukraine Defense Contact Group that was originally scheduled for October 12th has been postponed. I don't have a new date and location to provide to you. That's something that we're working through, and certainly once we do, we'll provide that to you. But to your second question, there absolutely is a lot of work that happens in between the UDCGs. And that really entails the capability coalitions working through their co-chairs on identifying, developing, and delivering capabilities to the Ukrainians, both for their near-term and long-term defense requirements, as well as one of the things that Secretary Austin, for example, and our policy team do on a very regular basis is working through ensuring that Ukraine is able to get the security assistance it needs to defend itself. And so that entails phone calls, it entails bilateral meetings and discussions that are very frequent. And then, oh, by the way, don't forget, you've got the Security Assistance Group Ukraine in Germany that is also working with our international allies and partners to help facilitate the acquisition and delivery of those capabilities to Ukraine. So the Ukraine Defense Contact Group is an incredibly important forum for helping to synchronize and to ensure that we're sharing information and providing Ukraine support in a cohesive way, but is by no means the only mechanism by which we support Ukraine. Thank you. Take a few more. Let me go to Louis, and then I'll come back to you.
Sure. Thank you. One question on Israel, Lebanon, and another on the hurricane. I remember that when
I don't think this thing's...
You were looking for clarity for quite some time from Israel about their intentions and their plans when the incursion went in.
Okay, now I'm testing again.
Is that still the case when you're talking about discussions? In other words, do you still need to get a clear picture other than this talking?
Okay, that's great. That's way better than what I had before.
I'm not sure I understand your question.
Let's go back 2 weeks ago. Israel went in, and the talking point was we are wanting more clarity from Israel about what their intentions are inside of Lebanon, how long they plan to be there, how large of an incursion this will be.
Okay, I'm not going to turn this into a Israel attack unless there's actual attacks. In China, young Chinese are threatening CCP rule and gradually revealed to the world and no one noticed. $7,000. If nuclear war starts, go to this country. Elon Musk leaping on stage. Let's see what else is going on here. Oh, I can't even stop the Indus growing all in Siberia. Woman says this and instantly regrets it. Okay. I asked 50 billionaires to buy my art. Horrible advice. Everything been great till the blindfolds came on. I don't want to watch stupid stuff like that. 2 weeks ago, Mission tries to get a call, but he's a nerd. We kill illegals. Okay. And Amber Hater gets carried by Amber in co-op. Okay, telling real estate scammers. I actually got the House Volume 2. Who's gonna face this global media? Okay. Okay, this might be something that I think I need to start looking at. This could be interesting.
That's a very good question. I think perhaps a part of what is driving folks' indecisiveness on who they're going to vote for is the fact that they don't know Vice President Harris well enough. We saw where she started when she became the presidential nominee, when she became the presumptive nominee. We saw where she started in the polls. And in a very short period of time, as people have gotten to know her, to learn more about her professional biography, her political biography, her personal biography, we see that there are a number of voters out there that like what they see. They like what they hear. They dig her record and are inclined to support her. This campaign has been under a very compressed timeline. It is unprecedented in so many ways. Yet and still, Vice President Harris is she's the underdog, but she's on the cusp of winning this race if she's able to turn out the Democratic base, if she's able to turn out those independent voters that feel orphaned, and the moderate Republican voters that feel orphaned by the Trump Republican Party.
So true. And let's look a little bit at the battleground states. We got 7 there that are going to be highly looked at in these next couple of weeks. I mean, it's no doubt that that's why we have Donald Trump and Kamala Harris today, both out in Pennsylvania, those two fighting for the Keystone State there. And that seems like the one where whoever it breaks to is going to have that momentum in the evening of November 5th.
Yeah, I mean, all eyes are on Pennsylvania, all eyes on the Keystone State. We know that Malcolm Kenyatta, Pennsylvania state representative, he's also running statewide in Pennsylvania. And I'd have to think that Malcolm Kenyatta voters may be inclined to support Vice President Harris. I think every little bit helps, and I think that may help in terms of bringing out a coalition of support for Harris on Election Day, and really helping to get that momentum going during early voting. But there's a reason why Vice President Harris will continue to hit not just Pennsylvania, but she's going to be hitting Michigan and Wisconsin pretty heavy this week, ending the week in Georgia. And former President Trump also understands the importance of winning Pennsylvania, and he'll also be there. And so, we're already seeing not just the candidates, but we're seeing their surrogates fan out across these battleground states to really stoke up what could be the margin of victory on Election Day.
And lastly, do you think in 3 weeks, next on Tuesday, they're 3 weeks away, do you think we will have a decision that evening or into the morning hours the next day, or do you think it'll be played out like in 2020 where it took days and days, where election night turned into election week? So what's your thoughts on getting a clear winner on the evening or the morning after?
I think best case scenario, if the polls are a little bit off, we may see a very clear winner the next day. I think worst case scenario, it could be not just a 2020 scenario, but a 2000 scenario. We already see folks lining up to sow chaos in the administration of this election in places like Georgia, where the Democratic Party of Georgia has an active lawsuit challenging some of the last-minute changes to rules around how ballots will be counted in Georgia. And so I think that offers a potential worst-case scenario where we may not know in the immediate days following the election, possibly even the immediate weeks following the election.
When you brought up 2000 there, that is a memory where a lot of people were thinking, okay, just how long is this going to go? And it turns out it went all the way there to December until we got the decision there for President Bush there at the time. But yeah, it'll be something to see, history in the making, that this has been an unprecedented election season, and we'll see just how it continues on these next 3 weeks. It'll be exciting no matter what, and I know guaranteed though this won't be the last time we're talking from now until Election Day. So we appreciate you joining us as always on Live Now from Vox.
Thank you, Mike. Take good care.
Take care. All right, everyone, and we will continue to bring you the latest on Live Now from Fox. We'll take another 2-minute break. Stay right here with us. More to come in just moments.
Thousand customers without electricity, and as a result of the storm, the St.
Back in 2020. Let's listen on Live Now from Fox. Breaking 2 spots in Wisconsin.
Yes, Mike, razor thin.
From all of the polling, it looks like it is razor thin. And of course, we're looking at those 7 battleground states that will be the deciding factor for either Donald Trump or Kamala Harris come November. So let's break it all down for you here. Joined now by my next guest, a friend here of Live Now from Fox, Dr. Nee Quartelai-Quartey. Thanks so much for joining us as always. We appreciate it.
Thanks for having me, Mike.
No problem. All right, so let's talk about it. 3 weeks away, and the polling suggests that this one is just razor thin.
Yes, Mike, razor thin. Look, this is the deal. We're in a very close contest. There's a very stark difference in the vision between Vice President Harris and former President Trump. And it shows in the polls. I mean, there are a number of folks who are saying, though, don't get so caught up in what's called the polar coaster. Don't get so caught up in that, that there are so many issues that are at stake. And, one of the issues that's been animating voters are issues related to the economy. And what we know right now is that there are a number of folks who are experiencing some level of economic anxiety and feel like opportunity just is becoming further and further out of their reach. And so Vice President Harris just today, her campaign laid out her next iteration of the economic opportunity agenda targeting black men who are a part of this gender gap in terms of support between former President Trump and Harris. This economic opportunity agenda for black men is fairly robust. I mean, it includes, investments in early screenings and detections to get at some of the health disparities that we see among black men. It also includes providing 1 million loans that are fully forgivable for folks that are looking to start a business. There's plenty of black entrepreneurs out there, and then investing in more black teachers, because we know that black teachers make a difference. I didn't have my first black male educator until I was in graduate school, and we know that there are studies that suggest that black male teachers can make a big difference. Those are just some of the features in this economic opportunity agenda for black men that's being rolled out.
I also want to get your take. Last week, we saw the former President Barack Obama speaking to black males, and really almost, it seemed like giving a stern talking about it's up to them to get their support going for Kamala Harris. What was your take on that?
Well, look, the black community is not a monolith. I think there's room for lots of different opinions.
The IDF continues to attack Hezbollah targets
President Harris
in
has
Lebanon.
been pretty direct in her approach, saying that she doesn't expect for black people to vote for her just because she's black. She understands that she has to earn each and every vote, and that's why she's been crisscrossing the country, working to do that. The economic opportunity tour that she had been doing for some time is what led to the development of this economic opportunity agenda for black men. We know that access to capital is of concern, and this plan answers that and more. And so while a lot of folks are still talking about the comments that former President Obama made on the campaign trail late last week, a lot of folks in the community understand that there are areas of our community that may have issues with Vice President Harris because of her gender, but I've got to correct the record and say that when you look at exit polls from 2020 and 2022, black men have been showing up. Only second to black women most often in a lot of races, whether you're talking about Stacey Abrams' race in Georgia, or you're talking about when abortion rights is on the ballot in places like Ohio, black men have been showing up, and there's a very concerted effort to make sure that November 5th, 2024 is no different.
Another topic I want to talk with you because we are just 3 weeks away now, and is there any undecided voters still out there? And if so, how can there still be an undecided voter at this moment? How do you not know at this point who you're going to go for? What else are they waiting for, these so-called undecided voters?
That's a very good question. I think perhaps a part of what is driving folks' indecisiveness on who they're going to vote for is the fact that they don't know Vice President Harris well enough. We saw where she started when she became the presidential nominee, when she became the presumptive nominee. We saw where she started in the polls. And in a very short period of time, as people have gotten to know her, to learn more about her professional biography, her political biography, her personal biography, we see that there are a number of voters out there that like what they see. They like what they hear. They dig her record and are inclined to support her. This campaign has been under a very compressed timeline. It is unprecedented in so many ways. Yet and still, Vice President Harris is she's the underdog, but she's on the cusp of winning this race if she's able to turn out the Democratic base, if she's able to turn out those independent voters that feel orphaned, and the moderate Republican voters that feel orphaned by the Trump Republican Party.
So true. And let's look a little bit at the battleground states. We got 7 there that are going to be highly looked at come in these next couple of weeks. I mean, it's no doubt that's why we have Donald Trump and Kamala Harris today, both out in Pennsylvania, those two fighting for the Keystone State there. And that seems like the one where whoever it breaks to is going to have that momentum in the evening of November 5th.
Yeah, I mean, all eyes are on Pennsylvania, all eyes on the Keystone State. We know that Malcolm Kenyatta, Pennsylvania state representative, he's also running statewide in Pennsylvania. And I'd have to think that Malcolm Kenyatta voters may be inclined to support Vice President Harris. I think every little bit helps, and I think that may help in terms of bringing out a coalition of support for Harris on Election Day, and really helping to get that momentum going during early voting. But there's a reason why Vice President Harris will continue to hit not just Pennsylvania, but she's going to be hitting Michigan and Wisconsin pretty heavy this week, ending the week in Georgia. And former President Trump also understands the importance of winning Pennsylvania, and he'll also be there. And so, we're already seeing not just the candidates, but we're seeing their surrogates fan out across these battleground states to really stoke up what could be the margin of victory on Election Day.
And lastly, do you think in 3 weeks next on Tuesday, there 3 weeks away, do you think we will have a decision that evening or into the morning hours the next day, or do you think it'll be played out like in 2020 where it took days and days, where election night turned into election week? So what's your thoughts on getting a clear winner on the evening or the morning after?
I think best case scenario, if the polls are a little bit off, we may see a very clear winner the next day. I think worst case scenario, it could be not just a 2020 scenario, but a 2000 scenario. We already see folks lining up to sow chaos in the administration of this election in places like Georgia, where the Democratic Party of Georgia has an active lawsuit challenging some of the last-minute changes to rules around how ballots will be counted in Georgia. And so I think that offers a potential worst-case scenario where we may not know in the immediate days following the election, possibly even the immediate weeks following the election.
When you brought up 2000 there, that is a memory where a lot of people were thinking, okay, just how long is this going to go? And it turns out it went all the way there to December until we got the decision there for President Bush there at the time. But yeah, it'll be something to see, history in the making, that this has been an unprecedented election season, and we'll see just how it continues on these next 3 weeks. It'll be exciting no matter what, and I know guaranteed though, this won't be the last time we're talking from now until Election Day. So we appreciate you joining us as always on Live Now from Vox.
Thank you.
That's interesting.
Take care. All right, everyone, and we will continue to bring you the latest on Live Now from Fox. We'll take another 2-minute break. Stay right here with us. More to come in just moments.
The United States sending U.S. troops to Israel. A U.S. defense official tells CNN that about 100 troops are deploying there to operate one of the United States' most advanced missile defense systems. The Pentagon's announcement comes as Israel faces unprecedented attacks from Iran.
What we're seeing is a massive increase in the number of missiles and drones that Hezbollah is firing into Israel. The first 10 months of this war, they were firing anywhere from 30 to 50 per day. Over the last 3 days, they fired somewhere around 300 per day. This is the best system in the world, and there's only 6 of them, 6 batteries of these in the United States inventory. So loaning one and deploying a group of soldiers to Israel is a pretty big deal.
Just yesterday, a Hezbollah drone entering into Israel's airspace without triggering an alert killed 4 soldiers, injured more than 60 people. The attack was one of the bloodiest against Israel since the war began over a year ago. Joining us now with more, CNN Global Affairs analyst Kim Dozier. Kim, good morning. Always grateful to have you.
Let's see what this idea is to say.
Help us understand what this system adds to the defenses that the Israelis already have, and how concerned potentially Americans should be about U.S. troops deploying there.
It adds another layer of air defense in that what it does is it knocks ballistic missiles, mid-range and long-range, out of the sky. With Iran in its last volley of missiles it fired at Israel, it switched up to mostly ballistic missiles. This will counteract that, or help counteract that. So it's a look ahead to what might happen after Israel does some sort of retaliation against Iran's last volley of ballistic missiles. But it does put roughly 95 to 100 troops on the ground in Israel, which the U.S. hasn't done before. And it's also a signal to people in the Middle East and really throughout the world that while Israel is stepping up its attacks in Lebanon, in Gaza, that the U.S. is making statements about that, but then acting by sending this missile defense system. It's tacit approval of everything Israel is doing. At least that's how it will be seen by many in the Arab world.
So you see this as, I mean, it does seem to me a distinction between this is something that is designed to defend Israel from attacks, right? As opposed to, I mean, one of the major criticisms certainly the left has for politicians here is providing the bombs that are falling on Gaza. How does the Biden administration separate these two things, if at all?
Well, the important thing is that what it does is by protecting Israel, the U.S. Israel from stepping up to the next kind of response. By sending this now, before Israel has responded to Iran's last volley of ballistic missiles, it's saying, we will be here to protect you. You don't have to do as big a strike as you may be planning on Iran, on all of their ballistic missile sites, because we're going to provide another way to protect your population from this.
Really interesting. All right, Kim Dozier for us this morning. Kim, thank you very much for being here.
The U.S. announced Sunday it will send an advanced anti-missile system to Israel to help bolster the country's air defenses, along with about 100 U.S. troops to operate it. It comes as the aerospace commander of Iran's Revolutionary Guard Corps says his country is ready to respond to any action or, quote, misstep by Israel. CNN political and national security analyst David Sanger explains the significance of the Pentagon's announcement.
I think what else we're learning here is that the president's tolerance for having American troops in the way here, even in defensive positions in Israel, is increasing a little bit. That he thinks it's a relatively small risk to have 100 Americans there. Obviously, there are thousands of Americans on board the ships and in nearby bases to try to help defend Israel as well.
Well, Israeli officials say Hezbollah launched a drone attack on Sunday, killing at least 4 soldiers and wounding more than 60 people. It's one of the bloodiest attacks on Israeli soil since the war broke out last year. The drones targeted an army base about 40 miles from the Lebanese border. The IDF says it will investigate why the attack didn't trigger an alarm. Hezbollah called the retaliation for Israeli strikes on Lebanon on Thursday, which continued into the weekend. Lebanese health officials say Israeli strikes on Saturday killed 51 people and wounded more than 170 others. Lebanese health officials say Israelis continue over a wider conflict. Israeli strikes on targets in Gaza go on. This was the scene inside the Al-Aqsa hospital courtyard early Monday, where 4 people were killed and dozens wounded. Tents were in flames, with people trying unsuccessfully to put out the fires. The Israeli military says it conducted a precise strike on a Hamas command center inside the compound. And we have to warn you that the video we're about to show you is disturbing. On Sunday, more than 40 people, at least 13 children, were killed in another Gaza strike, according to hospital officials. At least 22 were killed when the Al-Mufti school in the Mizraet refugee camp was hit. But remarkably, today, in the middle of all this destruction, the UN is set to begin the second phase of its emergency polio vaccination campaign. The World Health Organization hopes to provide more than 500,000 doses of the vaccine after a successful first round in September, when 95% of eligible children were inoculated.
She glitched out there, she glitched
out. All of this is CNN's Nada Bashir. Nada, a lot of important points to get through here, but I just want to start first with the increased military presence that the US announced they were sending on Sunday. Troops on the ground, also a deployment of this advanced anti-missile system to Israel. Talk to us a bit more about the significance of this decision at this time when Israel is weighing and preparing for a response militarily to Iran.
Well, Christina, we know that the Biden administration has been in close contact and coordination with counterparts in Israel. The tone from the White House is one of de-escalation. They want the response by Israel to be proportional in order to prevent this from spiraling out of control into an even more broader regional war than what we have already seen escalating in parts of Lebanon and Syria, of course. But
what we've seen is the whole world at war.
From the Biden administration is that continued steadfast support for the state of Israel, and this support in the form of air defense system support and of course US troops as well to operate them comes amid those mounting tensions, amid concern that there could be yet a further response from the Iranian regime targeting Israeli territory if indeed we do see an attack by Israel targeting Iranian territory. Now this specific defense system is focused on defending against ballistic missiles. The hope would be that this would support Israel in its defense against any future attacks from the Iranian regime. And of course we have been hearing from Iranian officials suggesting that that attack, that response could well be likely if indeed we do see Israel taking action. Take a listen to this statement from the Iranian foreign minister.
It's your statement.
We are prepared for any kind of circumstances. We are ready for war, but we are also ready for peace. This is the definitive stance of the Islamic Republic. We are entirely ready for a military conflict. We are not afraid of war, but we do not wish for war. We want peace, and we will seek a just peace in Lebanon and Gaza.
Now, of course, the Israeli government and cabinet has not yet come to a conclusive decision as to what that response by Israel will look like with regards to retaliation for Iran's attack on Israeli territory on October 1st. Again, the Biden administration has been calling for the response to be proportional. They do not want to see Israel targeting Iran's nuclear facilities or oil fields. That is certainly a huge concern, with the potential for that to trigger an even broader war in the region, particularly with regards to Iran's regional proxies. And we've already seen the effect of the broadening of the conflict in Gaza, in Lebanon, in Syria, with disastrous impact for civilians there as well.
It's here to get fed.
We begin with West Asia. Adding a new dimension to the ongoing war in West Asia, the United
Let's
States
see what
has
this is
announced
all
that
about.
it will deploy
Israel to get
its
fed.
high-altitude anti-missile system and its American crew in Israel. It will mark the first time that the U.S. military personnel would be deployed in combat in Israel during the current crisis. The United States has said that it will deploy a terminal high-altitude area defense or THAAD system to Israel. The Pentagon on Sunday issued a statement saying Defense Secretary Lloyd Austin has authorized the deployment at the direction of President Joe Biden. President Joe Biden said he agreed to deploy the THAAD battery to defend Israel.
It's not a weird news.
Why did you decide to give a commitment for the THAAD to be deployed in Israel?
Defend Israel.
Any worries about it?
What?
Defend Israel.
What was that? Defend Israel. Oh. Defend Israel, that's his only response. Oh, that lady was there. This speech lady.
Defend Israel.
Any worries about it?
Oh, I thought she only lives in the White House.
Any retaliatory attack is expected to provoke a counter-strike from Iran, and THAAD battery could be used to intercept Iranian missiles. It will be operated from Iran, and THAAD battery could be used to intercept Iranian missiles. It will be operated by American forces on the ground and mark the first time that U.S. military personnel would be deployed in combat in Israel during the current crisis. U.S. troops have already been deployed in Gaza to build a pier for humanitarian aid and to man air defenses from neighboring Iraq and Syria. But they have not been engaged in combat in Israel so far. Now, Biden has previously said he has no plans or intention to put U.S. boots on the ground in combat. Israeli PM Netanyahu has also insisted that his country would defend itself with its own resources. But this move, if brought to action, would underscore the extent of his support for Israel. Biden told Netanyahu on phone call earlier this week that the U.S. will maintain its ironclad commitment to Israel's security. He also urged him to end attacks on civilians in Lebanon.
Yo, I thought they were going to kiss.
Would also urge him to end attacks on civilians in Lebanon. THAAD deployment would add to Israel's complex missile defenses that include the Iron Dome, David Sling, and Arrow systems. THAAD is considered complementary to the Patriot systems, but it can defend a wider area. It strikes targets at ranges of 150 to 200 kilometers. It is designed to intercept short, medium, and intermediate range ballistic missiles. The system uses hit-to-kill technology to intercept missiles during their final phase of flight. It relies on kinetic energy rather than warhead to destroy incoming missiles.
6,000.
Iran issued a stern response to the Pentagon's announcement, saying U.S. was putting its troops. Iran issued a stern response. The Iranian Foreign Minister Abbas Araghchi said that it has made tremendous efforts in recent days to contain an all-out war in the region. But Iran has no red lines in defending its people and interests.
Cool.
And spokesperson of Council for Arab British Understanding. Thank you so much for joining us on the show.
Pleasure.
Right, let me begin by asking you, we know that Israel is preparing for its attack on Iran and Iran might retaliate. Do you think Hezbollah and Iran successfully breached Israel's Iron Dome now that U.S. is supporting with Kabul?
It certainly looks as if Iran did that with that 1st of October strike of 180 missiles that some of them certainly got through. And we've seen in the past that Hezbollah has been able to deploy much less potent missiles, but nonetheless dangerous, that are able to overwhelm Israel's very sophisticated anti-ballistic missile defense system. And none of these systems are perfect, and you will see some getting through. But of course, Iran has the capability of sending many more. And what Israel is clearly worried about is that the event that it does strike Iran, and it looks like it will, that Iran will overwhelm the system with a much, much larger number of missile strikes. And that is why the US has decided to complement Israel's existing systems and to give it that shield. But I should say that this is also very much an escalatory move, because it actually gives Israel the confidence, the wherewithal to strike Iran without any sense that there is going to be a costly response. So for those in Israel who want an escalation, who want to take this further into a regional war, then they get that reassurance.
Right, and this also comes right before the November elections. How do you think U.S. sending THAAD defense systems to Israel impacts the elections?
Well, we shall see, but I think that President Biden has decided that it was important that the United States did this. He comes from a very traditional Democrat background that basically has made the support of Israel absolutely paramount, regardless of all other issues. So this means that he's ignored the massive violations of international law, what many people are calling a genocide in Gaza. He is ignoring the targeting, the injuring of peacekeepers in Lebanon deployed there by the United Nations Security Council, amongst many other issues. So that is Joe Biden to a T. He has been backing Israel with a pipeline of weapons for over the last year, ever since those Hamas atrocities. But he has not also at the same time said that those weapons must not be used in the violation of international law. And that's the problem. It's not necessarily the supply, it's the failure to say you must adhere to international law. And that means that Prime Minister Netanyahu of Israel has had a very free hand to do what he wants, whether it's in Gaza, the West Bank, Lebanon, and conceivably in Iran.
Right, and there are also reports, may I ask you right now, that there are reports that Iran has sent satellites to Russia for rocket launch. Russia had launched Iranian satellites in the past too. Do you think this is going to impact such activities, and it's going to impact the war, and is going to escalate and involve other countries and make it even a bigger conflict?
This is a consequence of US and Israeli policy pushing Russia and Iran closer together. They're not actually natural partners in many ways. They have two very, very different political systems. Historically, Russia and Persia, as it used to be, always viewed each other suspiciously. They were powers that competed with each other. And they have differing ambitions, but they're brought into the same camp because both feel that they are being targeted by the West. They both, of course, have appalling human rights records. They have an appalling record themselves in adhering to international law, and Russia has invaded a neighboring state. But they are certainly working together much closer than they were in the past. And in the past, we've seen that Russia would be rather reluctant to give Iran very sophisticated technology. It tended to hold it back. But those days are long since gone, and actually what we find is that Iran is supplying missile technology, drones, to Russia in order to enable it to prosecute its war in Ukraine. So the two are now in a much, much closer relationship, not because of any great love, but mutual interest.
Absolutely. Now, what happens next
It's
is, of course,
interesting
we're
that
going
you
to see
say that.
hoping for a less escalation, but thank you so much for joining us. That was Chris Doyle joining us
A
from London,
de-escalation, she
Director and
means.
spokesperson of Council for Arab-British Understanding. Thank you so much for joining us.
Thank you.
Cool. I just want to save this in my title so that people don't say I'm trying to do some copyright strike, and then go at WION, and then just do that. Let's check this, and then just do that. Cool. So the next video we're gonna watch is gonna be this one. It's from the military show, and then we'll just see what it comes down to. See what it says.
Only the dead have seen.
Cool. Let's check. Let's go. Let's go. Let's go. I'm gonna play it now. Let's do this.
At the end of war. This infamous quote, popular among US soldiers, captures perfectly the unrelenting cycle of conflict that plagues humanity, and that certainly plagues 2024. As the year unfolds, the world bears witness to dozens of ruthless wars, each a testament to the unending struggle for power, freedom, and survival, and a reminder that peace is but a fleeting illusion. You no doubt know about the two heavily publicized conflicts raging in 2024, the Russo-Ukrainian war and the Israeli-Palestinian conflict. But the truth is that Ukraine and Palestine are just 2 out of 50 global territories plagued by war or senseless violence, according to the ACLED Conflict Index. This project assesses every country and territory based on 4 indicators: deadliness, danger to civilians, geographic diffusion, and armed group fragmentation. It then uses the data to rank the affected territories by the severity and impact of their conflicts. This mapping of the global landscape of conflict also helps shed light on lesser-known, yet equally devastating wars that often escape headlines. According to the ACLED Conflict Index, there's been a 22% increase in political violence recorded in the last 5 years. In 2023 alone, most of the countries covered by ACLED, 168 out of 234, saw at least one significant incident of violence. In total, over 147,000 conflict events were recorded that year, resulting in at least 167,800 fatalities. Unfortunately, there have been quite a few bloody battles in 2024 as well. The ACLED reports that 1 out of every 6 humans on the planet has been exposed to armed conflicts in one form or another since the beginning of 2024. These horrifying figures beg the question, why don't we know more about these bloody conflicts? The harsh truth is that only the incidents that directly impact geopolitical interests and have resonance beyond the borders of the country in conflict will garner widespread media attention. Take the conflicts in Palestine and Ukraine as examples. The outcome of both of these conflicts has major implications for their respective regions, as well as global alliances, security, and international law. As such, they receive continuous coverage and analysis from media outlets around the world. In contrast, conflicts in less strategically significant regions often struggle to attract sustained attention, despite their sheer brutality and profound humanitarian impact. But that's what this video is for. It will shed light on all ongoing conflicts that would otherwise go unnoticed or underreported. But unfortunately, even this video won't be able to give each conflict the deep dive it deserves. There are simply too many wars going on and too little time. So for starters, we'll do a quick overview of all the armed conflicts currently taking place around the world before exploring many of them in more detail. The Middle East and North Africa undoubtedly have it the worst. According to Our Rule of Law in Armed Conflict Online portal, these regions are currently affected by over 45 individual armed conflicts raging in the following territories: Cyprus, Egypt, Iraq, Israel, Libya, Morocco, Palestine, Syria, Turkey, Yemen, and Western Sahara. Most of these are non-international conflicts, meaning they involve armed groups within a single country rather than conflicts between states. Once you look at the rest of Africa, it doesn't get much better, with more than 35 non-international armed conflicts taking place all over the continent, including the territories of Burkina Faso, Cameroon, the Central African Republic, the Democratic Republic of the Congo, Ethiopia, Mali, Mozambique, Nigeria, Senegal, Somalia, South Sudan, and Sudan. Asia is the setting for 19 non-international armed conflicts involving 5 separate countries: Afghanistan, India, Myanmar, Pakistan, and the Philippines. As for Europe, you already know that the continent is the theatre of the Russo-Ukrainian War, the first full-scale war on the continent since World War II. However, you might not know about 3 major military occupations also taking place in Europe, involving Armenia, Azerbaijan, Georgia, and Moldova. While Latin America's armed conflicts are non-international, 6 of them to be precise, they are intense enough to put the 2 affected countries, Mexico and Colombia, among the top 10 countries with extreme conflicts, according to the ACLED Conflict Index. Now that you have a better idea of the sheer scale of international conflicts in 2024, let's have a closer look at the worst among them. Though ranking countries by violence is a truly grim task, as every war-torn land bears the heavy burden of suffering and devastation, we'll rely on the ACLED Conflict Index ranking when listing the ongoing wars in 2024. According to the index, 10 territories in the world are characterized by extreme violence. 4 of them are in Latin America: Mexico, Brazil, Colombia, and Haiti. 3 are in the Middle East: Palestine, Yemen, and Syria. 2 in Africa, Nigeria, and Sudan, and 1 in Asia, Myanmar. Although Myanmar is the only country in Asia affected by extreme violence, it also tops the ACLED Conflict Index ranking, which is why it will be our first stop. Myanmar is currently being torn apart by a horrific civil war, also called the Burmese Spring Revolution or People's Defensive War. While plagued by insurgency since 1948, the ongoing civil war in Myanmar officially started on May 5, 2021. What triggered this brutal war was the February 1st coup d'etat, in which the Tatmadaw, Myanmar's military, forcefully deposed the democratically elected government led by President Win Myint and State Chancellor Aung San Suu Kyi. Initially, the disgruntled people of Myanmar took to the streets to protest this shocking coup. However, as the military regime responded with force, the protesters realized that chants, signs, and symbolic acts weren't enough. So many of them took up arms and braced for a fight that would redefine their struggle for freedom and democracy. On May 5th, the National Unity Government, the newly formed coalition opposing the military junta, announced the formation of its armed wing, the People's Defense Force, or PDF for short. However, the PDF isn't the only faction fighting for democracy in this conflict. The war is actually fought by dozens of armed resistance groups and hundreds of militias across Myanmar, each battling for a shared goal, to overthrow the oppressive regime and restore democratic governance. Due to the sheer number of factions involved in the Myanmar civil war, the ACLED Conflict Index also ranks this country as the most fragmented in the world. However, in October 2023, several rebel factions united against the military junta in order to launch an ongoing military offensive known as Operation 1027. During Operation 1027, the rebels managed to seize 36 towns and 36 strategic outposts, scoring victory after victory. However, the intensity of this conflict is what catapulted Myanmar to the top of the ACLED Conflict Index rating. So far, Operation 1027 displaced 335,000 people and claimed the lives of thousands. Unfortunately, these figures are just a fraction of the total devastation caused by the Myanmar civil war. Since the 2021 coup in Myanmar, over 2.7 million people have been internally displaced, with another 113,000 fleeing Myanmar altogether. Over 53,000 lost their lives in the conflict, with almost 5,000 of them being civilians. The devastation spread onto properties as well, with almost 84,000 of them being burned or destroyed since the coup. But believe it or not, these figures can't come close to the ones caused by the second entry on our list, the Syrian civil war. Though to be fair, this civil war has been going on for much longer, since 15th of March 2011, to be precise. This war is a multi-sided, overlapping conflict involving various state-sponsored and non-state actors. This dispersed nature of the conflict is precisely why the ACLED Conflict Index ranks Syria as the second most conflicted country in the world. But how did these conflicts even start? Similarly to Myanmar, they started with large-scale protests against an authoritarian regime, this one led by President Bashar al-Assad. These pro-democracy rallies across Syria were part of the wider wave of Arab Spring protests in the region. However, these protests also turned bloody relatively quickly, forcing the rebels to take up arms. By mid-2012, this insurgency would escalate into a full-blown civil war. On the one side of this war, you had the Syrian government backed by Russia and Iran. On the other, there were anti-government rebel groups backed by the US and its allies, such as France, Italy, the UK, Saudi Arabia, Turkey, and the United Arab Emirates. However, the conflict between the Syrian government and its opposition forces combined to form just one of the driving elements of the conflict in the country. The other two have been coalition efforts to defeat the self-proclaimed Islamic State and the conflict between Syrian Kurds and Turkish forces. As you can imagine, these overlapping conflicts resulted in some devastating consequences. Almost 7.2 million Syrians have been internally displaced by the civil war, while another 5.4 million live as refugees abroad. Over 600,000 people have been killed during the war, with 1/3 to a half of them being civilians. Owing to the Syrian civil war, 7 out of 10 Syrians now require humanitarian assistance. The humanitarian crisis in the next territory on the ACLED Conflict Index list, Palestine, is also dire, and that's an understatement. Of course, this horrific crisis stems from the next ongoing conflict we'll discuss, the Israel-Hamas war. Since this is one of the 2 ongoing wars the world is acutely aware of, we won't go into too much detail. As its name suggests, this war is fought between the State of Israel and Hamas-led Palestinian militant groups, primarily in the Gaza Strip, a small, densely populated territory in Palestine. Since the conflict affects virtually all Palestinian territories, the ACLED Conflict Index labels it as the most diffuse war in the world. Now the conflict between Israel and Palestine is nothing new. It's been going on for decades. However, the current Israel-Hamas war, the deadliest of all the conflicts, started on October 7, 2023, following a shocking surprise assault by Hamas on southern Israel. During the attack, an estimated 3,000 militants breached the Gaza-Israel barrier and started attacking Israeli civilian communities and military bases, slaughtering 1,139 people. The Israeli Defense Forces, or IDF for short, responded some 3 weeks later, after first clearing the militants from its territory, by launching one of the most devastating bombing campaigns in modern history, followed by a large-scale ground invasion of Gaza. The initial 3-month-long aerial campaign involved over 3,000 airstrike events in 85 locations across Gaza, a stretch of land occupying 141 square miles. This unprecedented campaign claimed the lives of as many as 23,000 Gazans. By May 2024, this number grew to almost 40,000, mostly civilians. Civilians are also the primary victims of the next war we'll discuss, Mexico and its war on drugs. Naturally, this war significantly differs from the others on the list, and it's an asymmetric conflict fought between the Mexican government and various drug cartels. This conflict has become so brutal and widespread that many Mexican citizens believe they're living in the midst of a civil war, which few officials want to acknowledge. The severity of this war is the reason why the ACLED Conflict Index ranks Mexico as the 4th most violent country in the world, as well as the #1 most dangerous country for its citizens, who are regularly directly targeted by cartels. These citizens are kidnapped, extorted, or killed for standing in the way of cartel operations, or even just being caught in the wrong place at the wrong time. Since 2006, the year the Mexican government officially declared war on criminal organizations, over 400,000 people have been killed, and more than 100,000 of them are still missing. But what sets many of these killings apart is their sheer brutality. Cartels are known to carry out mass executions, behead people, dump their bodies in the streets, or hang them from bridges. Worst of all, there seemingly isn't an end in sight for all this violence. As of 2024, over 70 armed cartels are vying for control of lucrative illicit economies in Mexico, and they will likely only get more vicious to achieve their goals. The Mexican state forces, though, aren't giving up either. In 2023, there was a 24% increase in armed interactions between them and opposing criminal groups, compared to the 705 events recorded in 2022. However, these conflicts still contribute to the cycle of violence, exacerbating the daily horrors faced by Mexican citizens. Unfortunately, the citizens of the next country on the ACLED Conflict Index list, plagued by an ongoing war, have experienced similar violence in the last 4 years. The country in question is number 7, Haiti, and the reason it makes our list is its ongoing gang war. Although Haiti has had a rather turbulent history, filled with instability, violence, coups, dictatorial regimes, and foreign interventions, the gang war officially started on May 24, 2020, following a series of civilian attacks by a coalition of gangs. Since then, the Haitian security forces have struggled to maintain control, with their ill-equipped national police quickly deteriorating due to personnel loss and corruption. Seeing the Haitian government as useless, some citizens have even taken matters into their own hands, launching the Bois Carré vigilante movement, which took out 264 suspected gang members in the first 3 months of the operation, burning some of them alive. Of course, vigilante killings are still killings and only further fuel the already escalating violence. The violence has so far caused over 2,500 deaths or injuries and internally displaced more than 360,000 people. The number of people displaced within Haiti is almost equal to the number of people killed in the next conflict on our list, the Yemen civil war. This brutal war has been ongoing since 2014, with multiple actors involved. There's the internationally recognized Republic of Yemen, led by the Presidential Leadership Council and backed by a Saudi-led coalition. Then there's the Iran-backed Houthi movement, with the Supreme Political Council as its executive body. And finally there's Al-Qaeda in the Arabian Peninsula, a Sunni Islamist insurgent extremist group. The Houthis became internationally known when they started attacking shipping vessels affiliated with Israel that passed through the Red Sea, which severely disrupted this major trade route, responsible for 30% of container trade and 12% of global oil transit. As a response, the US, the UK and their allies conducted a series of airstrikes against the Houthi-controlled areas of Yemen in January 2024. Since then, there have been over 460 airstrikes on dozens of locations across Yemen, and they still continue to this day. After this refresher on how the Houthis became known globally, let's get back to the beginning. How did the Yemen civil war start? Well, it started with the Houthis as well. Ever since the Houthi movement, officially known as Ansar Allah, first arose in the 1990s, they have opposed the Yemeni government and even led some low-level insurgencies in the past. However, the ongoing conflict officially ignited by the Battle of Sana'a in September 2011, when the Houthis marched from their stronghold in the north and seized Yemen's capital, Sana'a. By early 2015, they had forced then-President Abdrabbu Mansour Hadi to flee Yemen and seek refuge in Saudi Arabia. In fact, Saudi Arabia actually got involved in the conflict, launching a military intervention with the goal of restoring Hadi's government. Though they succeeded briefly, the Hadi government was eventually dissolved in April 2022. With incessant fighting between the government and the rebels, indiscriminate bombings by the Saudi-led coalition, and al-Qaeda's involvement, it shouldn't be surprising that the Yemeni civil war is drenched in blood. The Saudi airstrikes alone have killed or injured over 20,000 civilians since they began in March 2015. Overall, the war in Yemen has cost over 370,000 people their lives, both directly and indirectly. Directly through fighting, which claimed some 150,000 lives. Indirectly, as a result of food insecurity and lack of accessible health services. Although a ceasefire was brokered in April 2022, Yemen is still experiencing one of the worst humanitarian crises in the world, with 2/3 of its population, around 21.6 million people, in desperate need of humanitarian assistance. Some 1,200 miles away from Yemen, another country has also been torn apart by a brutal civil war, Sudan. As with many of the civil wars we've discussed in this video, there has been a long and tumultuous history between the factions that ended up as combatants. However, the conflict itself started in April 2023, when tensions between the Sudanese Armed Forces, SAF, and the official military forces of the Republic of Sudan, and the Rapid Support Forces, RSF, a paramilitary group formerly operated by the government of Sudan, boiled over. RSF started attacking a series of governmental sites, including the principal airport in Khartoum, the capital city. Since then, fighting has been chiefly concentrated in major urban centres, with Khartoum seeing some intense clashes. The conflict has also drawn in various rebel groups, ethnic militias, and regional actors, further complicating the situation and causing concern that the war might spill over into South Sudan, which gained its independence in 2011. But even with all these concerns, international efforts to stop the war have been lackluster at best, which means that this bloody conflict is unlikely to end soon. This indefinite continuation of the conflict is sure to have catastrophic consequences for the civilian population, which has already suffered greatly in the one short year of the war. Over 7.7 million civilians have been internally displaced in a little over a year, with another 2.2 million fleeing the country altogether to neighbouring Chad, South Sudan, Egypt and Ethiopia. That's 20% of the total population of Sudan displaced in some 15 months. There have also been at least 15,000 fatalities, with some estimates putting the human toll at least 10 times more. The widespread atrocities and food shortages have only exacerbated the humanitarian crisis in Sudan, leaving nearly 25 million people, over half of them children, in desperate need of relief. After Sudan, a country struck by a merciless civil war, we moved to Ukraine, a country torn apart by a ruthless Russian invasion. As we've already explained, we won't spend too much time rehashing this widely known war, as this video primarily aims to highlight the lesser-known conflicts of the world. But just because the Russo-Ukraine war is well known, doesn't mean we should overlook its profound and far-reaching consequences, as well as the unprecedented destruction and suffering it brought upon Ukraine. Since Russia first invaded Ukraine in February 2022, 3.7 million people have been driven away from their homes and internally displaced, while 6.5 million have sought refuge in neighbouring countries like Poland, which has welcomed over 60% of all Ukrainian refugees. Almost 40% of the Ukrainian population, some 14.6 million people, are also in desperate need of humanitarian assistance in 2024. In 2 years of the invasion, there have also been at least 10,000 civilian deaths, with another 20,000 people injured. That's not to mention all the war crimes committed in the country, which have led to Russian President Vladimir Putin to be labelled as modern-day Hitler. With the ongoing wars taking place in the most violent countries out of the way, let's continue working our way down the ACLED list to mention the remaining lesser-known wars of 2024. Next on the ACLED Conflict Index ranking, you'll find the second largest country in Africa, the Democratic Republic of the Congo, or DR Congo for short. The reason why this country is marked as having a high level of violence in 2024 is the ongoing conflict between the national military and insurgents in the eastern part of the country. The insurgents chiefly consist of M23, a rebel group with ties to the Rwandan and Ugandan governments, and the Allied Democratic Forces, an ISIS-affiliated militia group. This conflict began following fraudulent national elections in December 2023 and dramatically intensified in February 2024. Following this surge in violence, the United Nations reported that the number of internally displaced people in DR Congo reached 7.2 million in March 2024, making it one of the highest displacements in the world. The conflict, which has been going on since 1996, also claimed the lives of a staggering 6 million people. Although the country is currently experiencing a humanitarian truce, the war shows no signs of abating. Even worse, there are justifiable fears that the violence will only escalate further and the conflict will spread regionally. Elsewhere on the African continent, some 2,300 miles away from DR Congo, another civil war is raging on, this time in Mali. The so-called Mali War started in January 2012, when several insurgent groups began fighting a campaign against the Malian government, aiming to win independence or at least greater autonomy for northern Mali. Though this civil war experienced stretches of relative peace, the situation deteriorated in 2023, following the expulsion of UN peacekeepers from the country. These peacekeepers were part of the UN Multidimensional Integrated Stabilization Mission in Mali, which turned out to be the deadliest peacekeeping mission for the UN, with at least 175 deaths listed as malicious acts. Just 400 miles away, on the same continent, Burkina Faso has been going through a similar civil conflict. The combatants in this war are the government of Burkina Faso and Islamist rebels, mostly from Al-Qaeda and the Islamic State. The civil conflict began in August 2015 and has since led to the displacement of more than 2 million people and the deaths of at least 10,000 more. The wars in Mali and Burkina Faso are often interpreted as theatres of the insurgency in the Sahel, a violent Islamist rebellion plaguing the Sahel region of West Africa since the 2011 Arab Spring. Besides Mali and Burkina Faso, this insurgency has also intensified violence in Niger. This leaves us with just 2 more African nations characterized as countries with high violence levels by the ACLED Conflict Index, Ethiopia and Cameroon. Ethiopia is currently experiencing a devastating humanitarian crisis resulting from the Tigray War, an armed conflict that lasted for 2 years, from November 2, 2020 to November 3, 2022, and claimed 600,000 documented casualties. But while this conflict officially ended in 2022 with a peace agreement, violence and human rights abuses continue to plague the country, making recovery a distant dream for many. The situation is further complicated by ethnic tensions and ongoing clashes involving militia groups from the regions of Amhara and Oromia, exacerbating the overall instability. This new war in Ethiopia, named the War in Amhara, began in April 2023 after the Ethiopian military raided the Amhara region to disarm the Amhara Special Forces. Although this war has only been going on for a little over a year, it's already been marked by horrifying civilian suffering, including mass executions of citizens accused of supporting the rebels. As for Cameroon, the country has been dealing with a civil war since September 9, 2017. This war is also known as the Anglophone crisis, since it refers to a conflict between the country's English-speaking minority in the northwest and the French-speaking majority in the southwest. The roots of the crisis lie in the historical grievances and marginalization felt by the Anglophone population, who have long accused the central government of neglecting their region and imposing French cultural and administrative dominance. These tensions erupted into a full-scale conflict when separatist groups began demanding independence for the so-called State of Ambazonia, proclaimed by Anglophone separatists who are seeking independence from Cameroon. The Anglophone crisis has led to the deaths of at least 6,000 civilians and the internal displacement of 700,000 people. Back to South America, another ongoing conflict with a high level of violence is taking place in Venezuela. The crisis began during the presidency of Hugo Chavez in the 2000s and worsened during the presidency of his successor, Nicolas Maduro, in the 2010s. Amid the humanitarian crisis caused by ensuing hyperinflation, escalating starvation, disease and crime, at least 7 million Venezuelans have fled the country since 2015 alone. Meanwhile, 6 million of them have resettled in other Latin American countries, with Colombia welcoming almost 2.5 million Venezuelans. While discussing the humanitarian crisis caused by chronic violence, insecurity and extreme poverty, we must mention the so-called Northern Triangle region of Central America, consisting of 3 countries, El Salvador, Guatemala and Honduras. El Salvador is the only country of the 3 not listed among the top 30 most conflicted countries in the world by the ACLED Conflict Index, owing to the heavy-handed crackdown on gangs by President Nayib Bukele. Honduras and Guatemala, on the other hand, are still battling gang violence, high crime rates and severe poverty, which have afflicted them for decades. Finally, the last ongoing war we'll discuss in our video isn't listed among the top 50 most violent countries in the world, according to the ACLED Conflict Index. However, this conflict undoubtedly warrants a mention, given its regional impact and ongoing humanitarian consequences. The conflict in question is taking place in Azerbaijan, and is arguably one of the better-known conflicts in the world, the Nagorno-Karabakh conflict. This conflict has been officially going on for over 36 years, ever since the 1988 resolution passed by Nagorno-Karabakh's regional legislator, declaring the region's intention to join the Republic of Armenia, despite being located within Azerbaijan. The problem lies in the fact that the Nagorno-Karabakh Autonomous Oblast was established within the Azerbaijan Soviet Socialist Republic in 1923, despite being populated by 95% of the ethnically Armenian population. For decades, Russia has acted as a mediator between the two parties, but with Russia's attention now fully focused on Ukraine, the region has seen a surge in conflict once more. On September 19, 2023, Azerbaijan launched a large-scale offensive, occupying the Nagorno-Karabakh region. This offensive resulted in the official dissolution of the ethnic Armenian enclave on January 1, 2024, which sent over 100,000 citizens, almost all of the region's population, fleeing to Armenia in the matter of a single week. Azerbaijan now plans to reintegrate this region into Azerbaijan, and Armenia, threatened by neighboring Turkey and abandoned by its international allies, can only stand on the sidelines and watch it happen, for now at least. And there you have it, almost every surge in conflict once more. On September 19, 2023, Azerbaijan launched a large-scale offensive, occupying the Nagorno-Karabakh region. This offensive resulted in the official dissolution of the ethnic Armenian enclave on January 1, 2024, which sent over 100,000 citizens, almost all of the region's population, fleeing to Armenia in the matter of a single week. Azerbaijan now plans to reintegrate this region into Azerbaijan, and Armenia, threatened by neighboring Turkey and abandoned by its international allies, can only stand on the sidelines and watch it happen, for now at least. And there you have it, almost every ongoing war and conflict in 2024 exposed. Of course, almost is the key word here, as listing every single conflict would require far more time than we have. And as things are currently going, there may be new developments by the time this video is published. If you were tasked to update this video, which conflict would you add? Perhaps the conflict with Al-Shabaab in Somalia, or the territorial disputes in the South China Sea. Also, do you see another war emerging in the near future, maybe in Taiwan, Cyprus, or Iran? And finally, which of the ongoing wars shocked you the most? Share your thoughts in the comments section below, and thank you for watching the video.
Yo, that's crazy. That's crazy. There's so much things happening that's not covered by the mainstream media because it doesn't push Western propaganda, doesn't benefit Western propaganda. But yeah, I'm gonna swap over to a horizontal stream for the next, so just give me some time. Cool, let's start it up. Let's manage broadcast. What's this? Is that? This is just entertainment clear. Just clear it.